What's up guys, it's Rowan here from Artismart TV and today I'm sitting down with Koushik. Now Koushik recently graduated the HSC and did incredibly well in HSC English Advanced. He scored 93%. Now it's important to note though that Koushik, as he'll share with us, English wasn't his most favourite subject. And English is also a subject, if we're being really honest, it's super subjective. Like it can be really hard to know what you need to do to try to really break that band 6 wall and score that 90% plus mark. And so we're going to find out today from Koushik, as someone that will admit that English was not the sort of most favoured subject, like what did he do step by step to essentially still break that band 6 wall and score that band 6 result for HSC English. So welcome Koushik.
Thank you, thanks for having me here.
So just to sort of paint a little bit of a picture for everyone, right? English, love it, hate it, somewhere in between. Where was it for you?
Definitely somewhere in between. Didn't love it, didn't hate it, yeah.
It was just something that you're like, I have to do.
Yeah.
Now, of course, what are you studying at university now?
I'm doing computer engineering and biomedical engineering at UNSW.
Congratulations. Now, I know you did 4-unit maths, you did a lot of sciences as well, is that correct?
Yes. I took physics and chemistry.
Cool, so if we were to look at that, we've got really 8 units that are pretty heavily stacked maths and science, right? We've then got English sitting alongside you, which, we've got to get over the line. It's compulsory, it counts, unfortunately. Now, at the end of the day, you ended up doing incredibly well in terms of your ATAR. How did you end up going with your ATAR?
I was pretty happy with it. I got a 99.3, which is not bad.
Yeah, well done. I think that's probably an understatement. I think it's a fantastic result. Now, I share that because what you managed to do then with English, you scored a 93% in English, was really ensure that even though perhaps, where your passions and natural strengths may have laid a little bit more, the maths and sciences, you were able to still work systematically to really get English across the line and score that band 6 result, particularly with a subject, as we've shared, that's subjective. So I'd love to find out, my sense is to do well at English, there's sort of 3 big things that you need to do, and I'd love to sort of unpack them and find out how you approached each one of these. So I'd say that 1, you need to have a strong textual understanding of the text that you're studying, right? Step number 1, if you don't know the text, probably going to struggle, right? Number 2, you've got to be able to then develop, I think, highly sophisticated arguments and analysis. If you can't do that, the quality of your results is not going to be that great. And then finally, you've got to be able to write all of that under exam conditions with an unseen question. So we've got these 3 big things. And so I'd love, as I said, to sort of try to unpack a little bit how you built some of the skills in each of these areas so that you could excel for English. So let's sort of take a step back for number 1, right? When we think about building a strong textual understanding, what were the steps that you took to really get to know your text incredibly well?
So the first thing I did was to read my text.
So you actually read them?
Yeah, I did. So before, so during summer holidays before year 12, I sat down and actually read a couple of them. I just skimmed them really because my teachers would recommend I do that, and then over the terms and over the year, I reread them and then made sure I really understood what the plot was.
So amazing. So firstly, you're using your summer holidays a little more effectively than just chilling out and having a great time, although that's important. Yeah. So you've preemptively gone, great, I'm going to read my text. And the goal, it sounds like there is step 1, was really about familiarity, right? Not needing to know them in a lot of depth at that point, but knowing the plot, the characters, the ideas broadly, so that when you started it in the school term, you weren't starting from scratch, you already had a bit of a map of what to do. So that's sort of step 1. Now, once you did that, when you then started, the text at school, right? What were you then doing? Because I'm imagining you're now doing a more closer reading of the text as a second time, is that correct? Yeah. What did that look like? What did the close reading of a text look like for you? So
we went through each scenes in class, and what I did was highlight the key quotes, made sure I understood what characters were there, what were they doing, and also talking with my friends and my teachers as to what is exactly happening, what's the deeper meaning behind the scene, so that I really get to understand the text in a more deeper level.
Cool. So we've got it's still about seeking understanding, and then of course you're starting to highlight. What then did you do with all of that? Did that sort of form a set of notes somewhere that you're going, great, obviously you can read a text, you can highlight a lot up, but not all of it is going to be relevant or then usable later on, right? Yeah. Did you take all of that and then sort of condense it somewhere essentially?
Yeah, so I took the key quotes, characters, and what their motives are, and I just put them in like a quote bank or like a general note kind of section in Word. And then over weeks, I just condensed them, made sure like I condense it down to like the important points, so that like I can reuse them in like an essay later on for an assignment or something like that.
Great. So I just want to tease a couple of things out there. One is in terms of the structure of your notes, if we sort of get down to sort of nuts and bolts for a moment for students watching, one, you've got some notes that are like contextual, that are not going to fit into a quote bank. Like they might, because it might be about the context of a text, right? It might be the connections between a text, for example. So you've got that, and so you've got in your notes sections where you might just have, paragraphs or dot points or so forth of key information. Yeah. And then you've got your quote bank, which I know, at our Smart we call it a T table, but there's all sorts of names that you might use for these sorts of things. Now, in your quote bank, was it just a list of quotes, or did you have it organized by maybe like a theme, a connection, or a character? Did you do anything else, or was it just like a list of quotes?
So it was a list, but it was organized based on scenes and characters, and it also had like a couple of key descriptions as to what it was and how it relates to like the overall text, for example.
Okay, amazing. So there's a bit of already like explanatory sort of notes that you're adding to this. Now, at that point, did you also identify the technique and a little bit of analysis, or was that something that you did later on?
I just had a preliminary draft kind of identification then, and then I refined it as we went through the text even more.
Okay, awesome. So that's just, and so you're doing this and you're creating this quote bank essentially. I'm assuming this is when I say on the fly, like iteratively. So it's not like you're doing the whole text at school and then at the end of it going, oh, I'm going to go create my quote bank. It was like as you did a scene, as you did it, you're immediately documenting it into your quote bank and sort of using that as your structure.
Yes, that's right.
Fantastic. So that's sort of your textual understanding, right? That was sort of step number one, I think, that we sort of looked at in terms of, the three big things that I think you need to do generally to excel. We now move on to then, okay, of course, we've got to be able to come up with sophisticated arguments, thesis statements, and analysis, right? And my observation is that's where a lot of students struggle. And I think it's also probably one of the key things that really determines the difference maybe between a band 5 and a 6 response, right? So I'd love to know how did you approach getting better at writing good thesis statements, great analysis?
I guess it's just practice. So so from the very beginning, I just wrote down draft essays, thesis statements, introductions, by paragraphs, and I made sure to give them to my class teacher, to my teacher out of Smart, so that I could get more feedback, and just using that feedback to redo them as many times as I can before getting them, I guess, right.
Awesome. So I think there's two really important things that you've shared that I want to really, I guess, double click on for a moment, right? And so the first one here really is that there isn't a shortcut. Yeah. Like ultimately the best way to get good at English is to write. Yeah. And it sounds like you were writing each week. Is that fair to say? Like that it was a weekly habit that you were producing some form of writing, even if it was small, because I imagine sometimes it'd just be like an introduction or a paragraph. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. So for everyone listening, like writing each week, like that's what you need to do. That's sort of a benchmark. Now, the second thing that strikes me, and it's something that, we spend a lot of time at Art of Smart, encouraging and talking about, is this idea of a feedback loop, right? The more feedback that you can get and the earlier that you can get it, the better you're going to go because you can fix those. Yep. So what struck me as really interesting is it sounds like you were quite intentional in going, how do I get as much feedback as early as possible so that I have more opportunity to keep iteratively improving and working on it. Now, what also I think is very interesting and I want to ask about in a moment is you also didn't just, by the sounds of it, do a piece of writing, submit it. The teacher, tutor, Katie from Art of Smart gives you some feedback, and then you didn't go, great, that looks good or bad, and then leave it there. Yeah. So what did you do? Because I think this is a really important step that's so critical in the feedback loop process.
So I had a look at what's right, and then paid special attention to what was wrong. So like all the crosses and red marks. So I made sure to highlight them and then look at the feedback and then redo the essay and then try to correct it and then resubmit it to my tutor just to have a look at it quickly and to see if I've done any improvements to the mistakes I've made. If so, keep that aside and then recheck that occasionally so that I know what's correct. And then if not, keep doing that again, making sure that it's correct eventually.
And that's fantastic because what that really is it's I think a recognition that one, you're not going to get it right and perfect the first time. You know, it's a first draft ultimately. And I find so often that's what I see students submit, like first or second drafts, right? And so what strikes me is by the time you were submitting something or by the time you were writing it in an exam or an assessment, it sounds like it was a fourth or fifth draft, maybe, right? And so of course, it's going to be so much better than what it was. So I think critical there, you've got to be really thinking about what you're submitting is something that is a fourth or fifth draft quality, not a first or second. Secondly, what's really interesting there is I think often we can look at feedback and think, oh, well, I've got the feedback, I'll be fine, I'll make the change when I do it next time. But I think truly we don't unless we actively apply it. So I think it's fantastic that your approach was to actively redo it until you got it essentially right. Is that sort of the approach?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, what I want to say is that it's one thing I've observed for really any student that scores incredibly well in English, and certainly for state rankers as well for English, is that attitude of going, how do I get the feedback as early as possible and then rework it until, teacher, tutor is essentially saying, look, you've nailed it. Like it's right on. So that's the second part. And really, as we talked about, there's no shortcut there. What I'd love to know, though, is do you have any tips for students who are wanting to try to get better at doing the analysis? Because I find that can be one of the real sort of stumbling blocks. And obviously, you've said practice and feedback, but anything else that you would sort of share with students who want to improve their quality of analysis?
I would also say to research more, because a lot of my ideas, like at the beginning, I didn't really kind of understand it on a deeper level. So I just went online and just did a quick search on what this could be. And then there were a bunch of research articles that went along on these topics, and I just read them, and I had a better idea of what the characters were saying, what the plot was, and that kind of helped me to build up my arguments and write a better essay.
Awesome, and so I think that's a really good insight, because I find that certainly when I did English myself many years ago, but have tutored as well, like I think the observation I have for a lot of students is that you feel the pressure to come up with some great idea just off the fly. And that's so hard to do, right? Because you're reading a text, you're reading it, often for the first or second time. And so to get a truly sophisticated idea, like often there are many other people that have spent a long time thinking about a single text that you can, piggyback off, essentially, right? And look and get inspired and then do it. So that's fantastic. Now, if we come to the sort of final sort of step in this three-part process, right? We've now got being able to now write this high quality sort of writing under timed conditions, right? Whether or not that's the trials or the HSC exam itself. Any tips or advice that you have for students that you found really helpful for you in getting good at writing under timed conditions?
For me, I wrote in short bursts. So I would write my intro first, and then my body paragraph, and then my conclusion. This was towards the beginning of my exam preparation. So I would make sure that I write my introduction in time, my body paragraphs in time, and then my conclusion in time. Once I'm satisfied with that, and then I will go to write the whole essay under time conditions.
Great. So first of all, we're doing practice in time conditions. That's really key, right? There's a timer and you're breaking it down initially in chunks. Now, are you doing this open book? So you're looking at the essay, because obviously you're not memorizing an essay to write that exact essay. You're writing an essay to build a broad memory of the essay so you can adapt it in the exam itself. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. So we've got an adapter, and I want to come back to how you did that, because that's, I think, a thing to talk about. Before we get there, though, coming back to this active rewriting, so you did it open book, where you had the essay available. How many times would you do that process of rewriting the essay in timed conditions?
It honestly just depends on what the essay is asking. So sometimes it would be 3 or 4 times. Sometimes it would take me a bit longer if the question is particularly hard. But I just keep doing it until I'm really familiar with what my introduction should be. For example.
So do you feel like generally there was a minimum amount of times on reflection that you were usually it took me about X number of times? Because it sounds like there's some variance, but it sounds like there's probably a threshold.
Yeah, I would say the minimum is 3 or 4 times.
Yep, okay, cool. Which is interesting. The reason I asked that is we find that we talk about something called the rule of 3, right? Which is generally, yes, we find that observationally, but also, data with the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve shows that we generally need three repetitions. Right. So it's interesting that for you that threshold was about the 3 or 4, which is really cool. So now I want to come to that other point that we sort of briefly touched upon, which was that question of memorizing the essay and adapting, right? Because obviously, the HSC for English now is designed to be much more, the questions can be much more specific, right? Which makes it, I think, harder intentionally from maybe prior years when the old syllabus was in play, where, students would memorize a single essay, go in and almost write that said memorized essay, and so it didn't really test your ability, foundational writing skills and thinking on the fly to be able to respond to a question. So how did you navigate, yes, memorizing it, but then getting good at adapting so that you could truly answer the question in the exam?
I guess it comes down to like being really familiar with your quotes. So I had a couple of quotes that I knew that could be applied to a variety of situations, making sure I knew what they were and just making sure that they can actually be applied to the question. So this came with practice again, doing a bunch of questions over and over again until I became familiar with them.
And so you were doing it to new questions, essentially.
Yes.
So you would, and I think this is a really important step. So the first time you've done maybe 3 rewrites, 3 or 4 where you're writing out your essay, right? And then separately to that, you're then doing some further practice, is that correct?
Yeah.
Where you've then got new questions that you could foreseeably get in the exam or the assessment, and still in time conditions, is that correct?
Yes.
And is it closed book at this point? So you're not looking at the sort of essay that you had written or essays, you're trying to do it from memory, or were you looking at that for inspiration still?
No. Once I became familiar with my quotes, no more open book.
Right, excellent. So it's closed book. And so what you're doing is you're truly recreating the exam conditions, because you have a new question, time condition, closed book, and then you're doing that a couple of times, essentially building that muscle then of learning how to respond to whatever question you get using what you've got. Fantastic. Now I know, during the year you were working with, Katie Edwards, one of our sort of team at Art Smart, a fantastic English tutor. What did the support look like in terms of, what were you doing on a week-to-week basis with Katie?
She was an excellent tutor. So every week I would come in and we would just talk about what we were doing in school, and then she would give me a couple of pointers on like the text we were reading, and she'd also give me a couple of questions to try out. And she'd also be really helpful to mark my essays that I would do in class, so provide some extra feedback that builds on the feedback that my teacher would give me, so that it gives me a better understanding of what to do correctly.
Yeah, awesome. That's great to hear. And to what extent do you think that extra level of feedback made a difference for you?
It was really helpful because even though my teacher's feedback was helpful, this kind of added an extra layer on top of that, which made me a better English, made me write better essays essentially.
And did you find that the accountability sort of helped knowing that, because it sounds like Katie was giving you writing to do each week? Mm-hmm. Did that help as well, just ensure that you were staying consistent with doing the writing and the work?
Yes, that's right. So on top of schoolwork, homework would also ensure that I meet that goal of writing every week, so that I consistently build on my skills as we go along.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great to hear. And what was maybe the best thing working with Katie?
Just her approachability. So regardless of if it was 10 a.m. on a weekend or a busy weekday, she would always be happy to help me out. So I would submit an essay at 10 o'clock at night, and then the next day at 7 o'clock, the feedback would be there in my email. So
that's great. Yeah, that's super great to hear. So I want to sort of zoom out for a moment and wrap up with a couple of questions right around particularly the approach, and we've sort of unpacked some of it, but maybe just some high-level tips, right? So tips for writing essays. Do you have any tips for students just on things that you found that were really helpful, that made a difference for you in writing great essays?
Well, this is common knowledge, but just sticking with the structure, I would say. So sticking with the peel or teal, whatever works for you. So making sure you have your introductory point statement, your explanation, your analysis, and then your linking statement, because sticking to that will make sure that you have a sound essay.
And what about unseen text? Because that's often an area that really stresses students out, because it's a bit harder to prep for. It's not like you can go and memorize some quotes and practice essays. You're going in, you're seeing your text, you haven't analyzed it. What tips would you have for students that worked for you in helping you really get better at the unseen text component?
I guess just exposing yourself to different types of questions. So there's a prose extract, there's pictures, there's poems. Just making sure you're exposed to all of them consistently, and you have a methodical approach as to how to answer each of them, basically.
Do you have any sort of suggestions on what the methodical approach was that you used?
So just looking, skimming over the text, making sure that you pick out points from different parts of the text so that it doesn't feel like it's all coming from one part, because markers really hate that. And then just adding that to your question so that you answer the question properly, I guess.
The final part of, the HSC English is also the Mod C component, right? Which, again, is an area I think that creates a little more stress for students, simply because of the fact that you could be asked to do a lot of different things. What are your tips for navigating and excelling in Module C?
I would say so there are three options, right? There's discursive, persuasive, and imaginative. Make sure you have like a general template for all of them, but especially for two of them in particular. So for me, I had a really detailed template for the discursive and the reflection, the imaginative tasks, so that when the question does come up, I can tweak it to answer it, basically.
And the reason you want to have 2 out of the 3 is why?
Because sometimes this happened in 2020, they might ask you to answer a particular type of imaginative task, so you want to make sure that you cover all bases.
That's right, and so 2 out of 3 is good because they usually, hopefully there's a bit of choice still. I think also the other thing I would say is sometimes you might notice that the question suits a particular type of response a little bit better, and then you have a little bit more flexibility in how you might handle it, which is great. A couple of sort of final questions to wrap up for today, I guess, would be any other overall tips you might give for students who are taking the HSC Advanced English course on doing well and excelling?
I would say don't be shy to ask feedback, because that's probably the biggest thing that helped me. So just keep asking your teachers, keep asking your friends, keep asking your peers for feedback, for help, and that really goes a long way to improving your English skills.